All right, guys, time for another head coaching candidate profile, and this is one that's been around a while. This guy's been floating around in the head coaching conversation for a while, and he hasn't gotten his chance yet. There are a couple different reasons why that might be, so it wouldn't surprise me if he's not even under consideration. I've heard a few days ago that he had zero head coaching interviews lined up, and it doesn't seem like Washington is considering promoting him. So there's something not so great going on here that is maybe beyond our understanding just a little bit. But I do want to talk about this guy because, as far as resumes go, it's good. And we should be open to anything. We should be open to the possibility of hiring anyone who has the credentials and record to back it up. So I don't want to pass this guy over just because it seems very unlikely. If he's good, he's good. Eric Bieniemy, 55 years old. Um, Generally speaking, he was a part of that Andy Reid coaching tree. That's what he's best known as. Part of the Andy Reid coaching tree, and that is why he's had a lot of success. It's also why, in part, he's not getting any head coaching looks because everybody looks at him and goes, well, he just held a clipboard for 5 years under, actually more than 5 years, almost a decade under Andy Reid. He was just the guy who held the clipboard for Andy Reid. Is that fair? It's hard to know because this most recent season was his first year away from Andy Reid, and things were really bad. He was the assistant head coach and offensive coordinator in Washington under Ron Rivera for 1 year, and it was bad. 19.4 points a game, 25th in the league, negative .084 EPA, 25th in the league, so that's trash. Now, Washington has some good running backs, some good receivers. They don't have a quarterback. So is it fair to judge him off of 1 year where he has one of the worst quarterback situations in the league? He's got Sam Howell, former fifth-round pick, who actually, at one point, things were going pretty well with Sam Howell. He got like a decent half season out of Sam Howell, and then everything fell apart, and Washington was basically, you could have mistaken them for the worst team in the league for the last half the year approximately. So I don't know if it's fair to judge him based off this 1 year where he doesn't have a quarterback. Similarly, though, if we step back a little bit, I don't know if it's fair to judge him for years where he had Andy Reid calling the shots, because that is a big benefit to have. Nevertheless, as the offensive coordinator of the Kansas City Chiefs from 2018 to 2022, basically the Pat Mahomes era, the results are impeccable. Most recent year, the Chiefs win the Super Bowl with the number one offense in points per game and number one offense in EPA per play, first. Year before that, they lost in the AFC title game, fourth in points per game, second in EPA per play. Year before that, they make the Super Bowl and lose it, sixth in points per game, third in EPA per play. Year before that, they go to the Super Bowl and win it, fifth in points per game, second in EPA. And the year before that, they lose in the AFC title game, 35 points a game, leading the league, and .237 EPA, first in the league again. So, with the exception of 2020, where he missed it by the barest of margins, every single year he was the offensive coordinator in Kansas City, the Chiefs finished top 5 in points per game and top 3 in EPA per play. So, it's hard to match that resume. It just is. But we have seen this movie before. We saw it with a guy like Matt Nagy going to Chicago and proving that he had very little to do with the success under Andy Reid. It was Andy Reid. And Eric Bieniemy, I mean, it's just 1 year without any quarterback, did go to Washington and stink up the place. Like, I'm not saying that it was his fault necessarily, but the joint was stunk up regardless. So that's the distinction that needs to be made here. And the fact that the distinction is hard to make, combined with some not so great things in Eric Bieniemy's past, like I believe there was a domestic violence charge in his past, has just made it hard for him to get a job. Because regardless of whether or not he's just a clipboard holder for Andy Reid, this set of results right here from 2018 to 2022 100% should get a guy a shot as a head coach. You could argue he kind of got a shot as a head coach in Washington because he was the assistant head coach, but I don't really know what that constitutes. Does that constitute a real chance? I don't think so. So it's tough. And the years before that in Kansas City, he was the running back coach. He was the running back coach from 2013 to 2017, which is when Andy Reid got there, basically. And he oversaw the latter portions of the career of Jamaal Charles, who had some really good years. 2013, he had over almost 2,000 yards from scrimmage and 19 touchdowns. Year after that, he had about 1,300 yards from scrimmage and 14 touchdowns. Also got some decent production out of backups like Niall Davis. 2015, things kind of fall off a cliff. Jamaal Charles gets hurt. They scrape together a little bit out of Charcandrick West and Spencer Ware for a couple years. It's okay. And then 2017, he oversees the breakout year of Kareem Hunt, who I believe made All-Pro that year. So what, we're talking 1,800 yards and 11 touchdowns for rookie Kareem Hunt, replacing the likes of Spencer Ware, who I think got hurt in preseason or something. And they moved forward with a really good running game after that point. Now, once he moved to the offensive coordinator position, the Chiefs stopped running the ball quite so well, but that was because their passing attack was so deadly. It was, what chance does the running game really have to do much when you're passing the ball that well? But he did good as the running back coach in Kansas City overall. There were a couple bad years in there where they just didn't really have players, but he did good with Jamaal Charles, and Kareem Hunt developed from a no-name to a all-pro, I think, in just that one rookie season under him. So good stuff there. Now, before his stint in Kansas City, he was an offensive coordinator for the Colorado Buffaloes. And you can't do worse than this. I'll say that. I'm not saying it's meaningful. This was over a decade ago. But in 2011, they scored 20 points a game, which was one of the worst. And then in 2012, they scored about 18 points a game, which was even worse. One of the worst offenses in the country 2 years in a row. Terrible team. By the way, the offense was significantly better the previous year, 2010. It was like below average. It wasn't even bad. So yeah, this is a concern. This is a problem. So I'm not going to act like this is the thing that should hold him back. This was a long time ago at this point, but this is not an impressive part of the resume. In fairness, the only big-time player he had in Colorado was Paul Richardson for 1 year. Our old buddy Paul Richardson. So not really a lot he was working with there. Now, before his stint there, he had a very interesting tenure in Minnesota, mostly as a running backs coach. And his time as a running back coach in Minnesota was excellent. This last year in Minnesota, he was the assistant head coach as well, by the way. But the main focus has to be his results as a running back coach. And, oh baby, now we're talking. First year, they have Chester Taylor, who actually plays really well for them, averages about 4 yards a carry, gives you about 1,600 yards from scrimmage. And then the next year, his second year, they draft Adrian Peterson, who would go on to probably become the best running back of his era. Him and I kind of consider LaDainian Tomlinson and Sean Alexander and that group to be the era before Adrian Peterson, of course. So Adrian Peterson was probably the best running back of his era. That rookie year, he hits the ground running and is dominant. The next year, he's even better. The next year, he's great. I mean, look at this production with Adrian Peterson. Big season after big season after big season after big season. Oh, by the way, Chester Taylor, this whole time, segues into a backup role and continues to be very productive behind Adrian Peterson. Over 1,000 yards as a backup in 2007. So there's some great stuff here. I'm not going to say that Adrian Peterson was good because of Eric Bieniemy, but Eric Bieniemy definitely helped sculpt him into the future Hall of Famer that he is now. And even this final year, I remember Toby Gerhart, a Stanford player, he got kind of subbed in as the backup after Chester Taylor left and did a fairly good job. But every year, Adrian Peterson making Pro Bowls. I think he made the All-Pro team a couple years in here. Absolutely excellent work from Eric Bieniemy controlling what he can control. The Vikings were a dominant rushing team with dominant running backs throughout much of his tenure in Minnesota. Last thing I want to cover is before his stint in Minnesota. And by the way, the Minnesota years were under Brad Childress, I think, exclusively. So Brad Childress, also part of that Andy Reid tree. So he's got deep roots in that Andy Reid tree. But before then, he was the running back coach at UCLA. So first of all, there's a very significant amount of running back coach experience in his ledger. So here's the thing. You bring Eric Bieniemy in, maybe the biggest positive influence would be on Charbonnet and Walker. And whatever running back we decide to go into 2024 with behind those guys, be it McIntosh or somebody else, he could be a very positive influence on those guys and really turn those guys into some of the best running backs in football. Maybe if you look at it through that lens, you forget about Metcalf a little bit, you forget about JSN a little bit, and you just think about, okay, maybe this Eric Bieniemy guy can give us the deadliest rushing attack in the league with our running back talent. Because look at what he did with these running backs throughout his career. Better running backs, maybe, than what he had, what he would have here. Like Adrian Peterson is a blue chipper to the extreme. But was Kareem Hunt a blue chipper? Not at all. Not even close. So that's an interesting angle to think about it. But anyway, for 3 years, he was the UCLA Bruins running back coach, 03 to 05. And basically, he and Maurice Jones-Drew were the toast of the town in UCLA for those 3 years. He had 2 excellent years to finish off his career at UCLA. The last year, I think they won 10 games. Excellent pass catcher, excellent runner, very efficient, got a lot of touchdowns that last year. Had an assortment of backups behind Mojo. I don't know how many of you guys remember Maurice Jones-Drew, but he was a very fun player in Jacksonville. He had Chris Markey, Emmanuel White, who would go on to be a 4th-round draft pick of the Redskins, and Tyler Ebel was the backup the first year. So the headline here is Maurice Jones-Drew developed as a college running back under largely Eric Bieniemy as his running back coach. And that's kind of the thing that I feel like put Bieniemy on the map as a NFL coach. So, yeah, he did a great job. Maurice Jones-Drew had a great college career and would go on to have a really fun NFL career as well. So that's where it kind of started. And that's the resume. There are some things a little before then, before 2003, but I didn't feel the need to include anything that happened more than 20 years ago here. The important stuff is great running back coach, phenomenal track record of working with some great players, Mojo, Adrian Peterson. You can throw Chester Taylor in there too, by the way. He had a 1,500-yard season under Bieniemy. Got great stuff out of Jamal Charles in the second part of his career. Developed Kareem Hunt. Oversaw a great, elite, phenomenal, all-time great offense in Kansas City. But how much of it was him and how much of it was the people ahead of him? Like, if you're talking about making Eric Bieniemy a head coach, you're really talking about these 5 years in Kansas City. And they're great. But are they him? How much did he have to do with that? I will say this, Kansas City's offense was not nearly as good this year in the first year without Bieniemy, right? They did take a step back, but is that because they didn't have very good receivers? Or is that because they actually lost something at that offensive coordinator position? So this one's tough, but I have to acknowledge the fact that there's something here, for sure. There's definitely something here, and I feel like there's something here that should get a little more attention and credit than it is currently getting. So let me know what you guys think. This is probably one of the toughest ones yet. If we decide to kick on the Andy Reid tree and pick up what drops out of it, I'm not going to be unhappy about that. I'm not going to be unhappy about it, but I get the concerns, and I also do get why, despite this guy's track record of success, he can't even really get an interview. All right, see you guys later. Go Hawks.